and we got an exciting program for you today. I have a special guest with me today, Prophetess Rhonda Phillips, all the way from Charlotte, North Carolina. And you probably saw her program on public access, Dare to Outdo Yourself. I know you watched it, and I know you have been blessed. She is a motivational speaker, she is an author, and she is a life coach. So she understands different areas about life that people are struggling with. And so stay tuned. Don't turn that down. Listen, we got some real talk for you. Prophetess, I am so glad that you are here.
Thank you so much, Prophetess and Andrea, for having me on your program on today.
Yeah, amen, amen. Listen, today our topic is going to be about addictions and how most of us come out of families that were addicted to drugs and alcohol. And so today's topic is going to be liberating. It's going to set somebody free, because I know there's someone who came out of a family that was doing drugs and alcohol. Myself, my father was a heroin addict. I was a drug addict for almost 18 years, and it's been over 25 years since I've been drug free. And so today we have a extraordinary program, and I believe it's going to touch the lives of many people watching, Prophetess. And as you share your testimony, as you have shared with me, that you came out of a family of alcoholics.
That's right. Well, actually, it was my father.
Yes.
I've shared my testimony before, but not, just broadly sharing it with everyone. It's just that, happens to be, when I'm around certain people at the appropriate time,
yes.
The appointed place, that has come up. And so I do believe that for someone who's watching on today, you will be blessed in some way, that you will be delivered with whatever you're dealing with, whether it be being a child of an alcoholic, being who is enabled, an alcoholic family member at some point in your life, and you're still trying to break free of that, then you're at the right place right now. So I don't know where you would like for me to begin.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about growing up in this type of environment. What was it like growing up as a child and then coming to the realization that, my father is drinking too much?
Yes. Well, I know for myself, initially growing up as a child in a home where you have an alcoholic parent, I thought that was normal. Something that I saw every day, and it was a routine. It was a lifestyle for my father.
Yes.
He drank every day. Primarily, he was a beer drinker. However, on the weekends, he took to the hard stuff, the hard liquor, and that's where you really saw a big change in him. He was the sweetest man that I would say that I knew. He was an athletic coach, and so other children gravitated toward my father. I have two younger brothers, and we grew up in a household of athletes. I played, sports.
Wow.
My brothers played sports. My dad played sports growing up. So basically, we all grew up, my father just instilled us to all play sports. And so we were all great at what we did. He and my mother both, they always made sure that they supported us in that endeavor. My father was right there in the midst of what we did when it came to playing sports. So for me, to see that aspect of him, being, sober, he was a great person, great person to talk to, great coach, all of those things. But when he took to the drinking, it was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So you saw that side of him where he would say things that he like he was a very quiet person.
Right.
So he didn't really speak a lot. And so the interesting thing was when he drank, especially on the weekends, that was a time when I was younger, where I saw how he treated my mother. My mother, she was a beautiful woman. She still is. She's a beautiful woman, most beautiful woman that I know. And she worked all of the time. So she worked. My father worked. They both worked. They were both. It wasn't like we lived in a household where everyone, we had parents who didn't try to do anything. They both worked, so it seemed like they had a normal life from the outward appearance. However, when it came down to my father having this drinking habit, he would express himself in ways that you would learn things about how he felt about people.
Right.
And so particularly my mother, that was one of the things I saw where they would get into arguments. He would, would just, the littlest thing he would find fault with her about. And so they would get into verbal arguments. A lot of, times there wasn't really a lot of physical abuse going on, but
verbal.
it was mostly verbal, and him just berating her. And, I would find myself, as I got older, coming into trying to break up the arguments. So I'm trying to stand in and break up the arguments. And I do recall, a couple of times where, especially the first time it happened, I tried to break up an argument between my mother and my father, because he was really just coming at her, and I just didn't like the way he was treating her. And so at this time I was a teenager, and I stepped in, and so he basically told me it was none of my business for me to butt out of what was going on between them, and I wouldn't. So he basically shoved me, and I fell to the ground, and he dragged me from my leg and just dragged me from one room of the house to the other until I got to my bedroom, and then he dared me to leave my room. So, that was the first time that I ever experienced that with my father, and it was like a big eye-opener for me, because it never occurred to me that he would ever do such a thing. I never experienced it with him before. So it caused me to have a greater measure of disrespect toward him as a parent, as a father, because of that. I got to the place where I became more voiceful in expressing myself in terms of what I didn't like, in terms of what I saw taking place in the home. And, interestingly, my mother, like I said, she worked a lot. She made sure that she was responsible in terms of trying to pay our bills. However, my father was one who would gamble a lot too. So he was not only just an alcoholic, but he was a gambler. He had a gambling habit too.
Hold that thought right there. You have said some things. I mean, it's just, and one thing about alcoholism and drug addiction, it's progressive. You can start off being a functional alcoholic. You can work. You can have a good job. You can attend all the children's activity functions, but after a while it takes a toll. If it doesn't get treated, if a person doesn't get delivered by the power of God. Now, of course, they have outpatient treatment and things like that, where they go to groups and things like that, but to really get to the core root of it, that spirit of addiction has to be cast out. And so for what I hear you saying is that your father, he was functional at one point. See, because no one just jump out and be an alcoholic. No one just gets on skid row. It's a process. And so he was able to function for a while, and then, of course, the abusive behavior. But one thing I want the audience to know is that alcoholism, drug addiction is really not the problem, although it is a problem. It is the stuff underneath. It is the real issues. It's abandonment, it's rejection, it's molestation, it's not having a father. It's so many things that contribute to drug addiction. And so what I hear you saying is that your father at one point, he was functional, and how he was emotional abusive, and how you said, you know what, you're not going to keep doing this, And so, yes, and I can identify with that. So so your mother was the breadwinner.
Well, actually, they both worked, like I said. However, my father, because he was a gambler, he gambled his money away to the point where he started gambling her money away, to the point where we started getting kicked out of our home because we, didn't have the financial means to continue to, pay the monthly bills and to, keep the home up in terms of the rent or whatever the case may be. So it got to a point where I've shared this before numerous times. I've never been one to have close friends, and the reason being is because we moved constantly. Every year it seemed like we always moved from house to house, place to place, apartment to apartment. It was always like that. So whenever we would move, we would always have to go to a different school. And, at that point, you have to meet new people. And I got to a place where I just got tired of trying to make friends because I knew that within a year I'd be moving anyway. So I just got to that place because, again, it was always just there was a lack of stability, a lack of security in my home environment. And so I never found myself at a place of trying to get close to anyone because of that, because of the constant moving, the lack of stability. It just became a part of who I was. So that became a norm for me. And so, interestingly, I guess the good thing about that is that I've never tried to get close to people. So I've never found myself to be at a place where, like, things that happened to me, where people have betrayed me, people have done me wrong, the ironic thing about that is that it has never affected me in such a way that it perhaps would have affected other people.
Right, right.
So people wonder, like, how could you put up with that, or how could you have dealt with that, or how
Because you
could
didn't let
have,
them get in your heart.
you know, how could you have allowed that to be something that you just were able to deal with? And it wasn't so much that I dealt with it. I always know that because of my experience again with my father, that when people are going through something in their life, even outside of just, you know, dealing with life issues after becoming an adult, I've learned that when people are going through things and how they treat, you think that they're treating you wrong, or people on the outside look at people that's mistreating you or doing you wrong, they have an issue. They have the issues that they haven't dealt with themselves.
Right,
So it's
that's
not
right.
you. It's
Right.
them that have the problem.
Right,
And
right.
you just happen to be in the midst of whatever they're dealing with. And sometimes they will lash out and take things out on you. However, ultimately, they have their issues. And that goes back to my father. He had some deep-rooted issues that he was dealing with. You know, honestly, I don't know what they were.
Right, right.
Because, again, he was a quiet person. So for me to be in the company of my father, to hear him really express himself, that never took place. You know, there were times when I used to, you know, try to find myself to be at a place of really getting to know my father, but he would never extend himself to, you know, be open with me or really anyone for that matter. The most I got to know my father, like I said, was when it came to playing sports. And he was a great coach. He was always there to support my brothers and me whenever we were playing, you know, participating in games. He would make sure he would be there. But I will share this. You know, my father, because he was an alcoholic, he's going to be with the Lord now. However, you know, I can recall times as a teenager playing sports, and, you know, my father, because he was always drinking, he would come to my games drunk. You know, I played basketball. He would come to the games drunk. My brother played baseball. He would come to the games drunk, you know, to the point where he would come and he would just, you know, cause scenes at the games. And so keep in mind, you know, you're a teenager and you're at a game, you know, watching your brother play, or you're at a game participating in the game, and your father comes into the gym, or your father comes out to the field, and he's causing a scene because he's, you know, he's drunk and he's cursing out the umpire, he's cursing out the referee, or, you know, he's walking around stumbling because he's not coherent. And your friends or people that you go to school with see this.
Absolutely.
And so you can just imagine, you know, what
the embarrassment
and the shame that that as a teenager that you're going through, that you're experiencing because of that. No one made fun of me because, interestingly, you know, I stayed in the books. You know, I played sports. No one made fun of me.
But it was what you felt.
Because, you know, I pretty much had established a pretty decent reputation for myself in terms of not trying to, you know, go out there doing things I had no business doing. However, you know, when people see this, it's like, you know, that's, you know, your father, and, you know, and it's like they know that he's your father.
Right.
But at the same time, too, they're not really making fun of you, but you can just imagine what they must be saying to other people when you're not around. And I have no control over that either, or had no control over that, but it's still something that I experienced.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other reason why I put myself in a position of not really trying to get close to people, because I did not want to have to endure anyone having to, you know, say anything to me that I would have to explain myself, or I felt like I didn't need to have to explain myself concerning what was going on in my home, you know, with my father.
Right, so if you keep them at a distance, then they can't get in.
Exactly.
And you know, it's something you said when you were trying to talk to your father. See, a lot of times people who are on drugs and alcohol, they lack communication. I came from a family where what goes on in this house stays in this house. We don't talk about anything. Matter of fact, you can't even verbalize how you feel it, you know. And so when you get alcoholics and they don't know how to communicate, you know, it's because they really don't know. He probably came out of a family that said, we ain't talking. You know, the average father spends 7 minutes with his family per day. It might be less than that. And this was a statistic that was done maybe 10 years ago or so. It might be less than that. And if you notice, when you communicate with the family, it's so important to have dinner with your children. You know, that way you get a chance to find out, well, okay, how was your day today? You know, you get a chance to establish this communication and let them talk. But now we're living in a time now where families, okay, the child is in the next room doing the iPad or a game or whatever, you know, and so among the families, there's a lack of communication, you know, and so I think your father, he, when you tried to say, God, Dad, talk to me, he probably didn't know how.
Well, interesting, and I can't go back to say how my father must have felt about some things, but I do know what it was like for him growing up himself. He grew up in a large family. He was the youngest of 7 children, and they were all, in terms of his siblings, he and his brother next to him in age, they were further apart in their ages from their other siblings. So that was a big gap. His mother, my grandmother, she was a political figure in the town that we grew up in. So she was pretty much well known in the community. His father had his own business. All of his other siblings, they were pretty much well educated. He was considered the black sheep of the family, so to speak. So that was another thing that I do know about him. There was a lot of struggle with him and my mother. They had me at a relatively young age. Just a lot of things I do know. My father was, how can I put it? He was the kind of person that a lot of other women gravitated toward because he was rather attractive. And so there were a lot of issues that he and my mother had because of that. And that was part of, why they would argue a lot.
Yeah.
And my mother is very beautiful as well, so you had that going on too. There was a lot of jealousy going on between the two of them. So those are things I remember growing up in the home. But aside from that, when it came down to my father, I know that he had some dreams that he did not pursue or he could have pursued. And I know that caused issues with him and his family, his mother particularly. I know he was offered a scholarship to play baseball in college, and he did not do that because I came along. I was coming, my mother was pregnant with me, so he chose to be a father and a husband and not go to college. But he did work a job. So, but there was still a lot of struggle, because having, a child, and then after that you have a year and a half later another child, and a year and a half later another child. Having children is a big responsibility.
Yes.
So for them to have 3 children at relatively young ages, I think that perhaps took a toll on him in terms of the responsibility as a man and as a father to have to take on that responsibility. To raise, 3 children and of course take care and be a provider in the home as well. Right. So I'm pretty sure for him, looking back now and knowing what it's like to be an adult and have to provide and have to, do things, I'm pretty sure that was something that he perhaps experienced as well.
Maybe experienced.
And not to say that you're making excuses for that. All I'm saying is that from a standpoint of someone who he didn't
fulfill his dreams.
Yes, someone that I knew, and the things I learned about him that he did not pursue, but rather to take a different path in life, and how that perhaps can be depressing, or how that, or the realities of life, or the responsibilities, how they can take a toll on a person.
Right.
So those are some things I know that from that perspective that could have affected him, especially when you have a parent yourself as an adult who pretty much had other plans for your life and you did not fulfill them. So those are things I know that he experienced from that perspective. Right.
Now, Prophet, let me ask you a question on that note. It sounds like, what you're saying is that, it being human, did he have a lot of regrets, because he didn't fulfill these things? How did you internalize that? Did you ever blame yourself for that?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
well,
because that's
I don't know if he had regrets. I just know that when I was a baby, I was told that my father loved me dearly. But of course, as you become an adult, or as you become a teenager, as you're growing up, you start to see how you're being treated. And I know for me, I have 2 younger brothers, 2 siblings. They're younger than I am. As being the eldest of the 3, a lot more was expected of me, and I figured because I was just the oldest. But now I look back and I wonder if perhaps it's because I was also a female, and they were male, but they were not. I was pretty much basically enforced to keep the house clean, to cook and all those things.
I got you.
My brothers didn't have to do those things.
Right.
The most they had to do was take out the trash and mow the yard. They got to be of age to do that, and I would question that. I was the kind of person, I would question things. As I became more aware, I'm like, okay, well, why do I have to do this and they don't only have to do that? Or why do they only have to do that, but I have to do all of this? So I became, to this day, I'm still the kind of person that I'm quiet by nature, but I'm very
Yes.
perceptive. I'm very observant about things and
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
And so I'm going to ask questions, and people around me a lot of times get annoyed with me asking questions because I'm getting to a place where I'm getting to the root of something. And when you get to a root of a thing, where you're getting to the root of a thing, people become very uncomfortable and uneasy being
Yes.
around you or having to have to
Absolutely.
deal with, answering your questions because it begins to expose things.
Absolutely.
And so that was a place where my father became with me.
Mhm.
Again, it was like, don't ask any questions, just do as I say.
Right, exactly.
Not as
That's
I do.
that household we come out
And the
of.
same with my mother. I would express to her things that are going on when she's not around because, again, my father would make me do certain things that my brother didn't have to do.
Right.
And I had issues with that.
Right.
And again, her thing was, he's your father, do what he tells you to do.
Mhm.
The situations were being made light of,
Mhm.
and not really anything followed through in terms of, okay, what's really going on.
Right.
So those are some things I experienced, and even I did share, I've shared on several occasions in terms of the leadership aspect of how I've come to be.
Mhm.
A lot of it has had to do with, how my father treated me. Once again, he was a loving person, a loving man, but when he got to the drinking, that really affected him to the place where he did not know, he would talk at you, he would talk down to you and not talk to you or conversate
right.
or have a conversation
Right.
with you or
Mhm.
converse with you. So basically, when it came down to him giving instructions, it was not showing you how to do it, but telling you to do it.
Right.
And so, like I said, I recall the time when he wanted me to, he gave me pretty much enforced me to do something. I had never done it before. So it was something that had to be done in the home. And my thing was, okay, well, I'll be glad to do it, but how do I do it?
Mhm.
And it was like just talking at me, just do it. So
Right.
I tried my hand at it, but it wasn't good enough for him.
Right.
And so he just basically continued to talk down to me,
Mhm.
chastise me. He talked at me,
Mhm.
ridiculed me for not doing it the way that he felt that I should do it.
Right.
And so that's all I'm listening to that, but I'm still trying to do it. In the midst of me
Right.
trying to
I
do
hear
it,
you.
he's standing over my shoulder, pretty much downing me for not doing it the way that he felt that I
Yes.
should do it.
Absolutely.
So I asked him again, well, can you show me how to do it?
Mhm.
And he never did. He just still continued to, pretty much chastise me for
and-
not doing it the way that he felt that I should do it.
And when
so,
you never was taught how to do it.
Right.
Let
So
me-
at that point, I just basically stopped and I walked away and
Mhm.
said, okay, well, if I'm not doing it to your satisfaction, then you need to do it yourself. And I just walked away.
Mhm.
So, it wasn't that I was trying to deliberately be disrespectful toward him. It's just that I can't continue to do something that I don't know
That
how
I
to
don't- right.
I don't know how to do
Right.
it. I'm doing it to the best of my ability to do it, but you're not showing me
Right.
how to do it. So
Right.
that was the first learning lesson that I got from when it comes down to being there for people.
Mhm.
I don't mind just always use this illustration. I don't mind getting on the floor with you and showing you how to scrub it. You've
Mhm.
never scrubbed it before.
Right. Exactly.
I don't mind doing that, especially if I'm telling you to do it.
Yes,
So-
exactly. Wonderful testimony. You're watching real talk, real issues, and real solution. Prophetess, one of the reasons I wrote this book, Understanding the Spirituality of Drug Addiction, is because it affects the family. A lot of times people think that, okay, if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict, this is what they say. I ain't bothering nobody. I'm just, it affects the whole family. And from your testimony, and I know that there's people watching this and can identify with this, I really feel this. And the abuse you suffer, the emotional abuse, the it's my fault if he didn't pursue his dreams or whatever. But there's somebody who's feel like that. And I want you to know that you were not a mistake, that you were ordained by God to be born on this earth at the time you were born, the year you were born, and you're not a mistake. There's no child come into this world without the approval, without the appointed time that God allows them. I don't care what the circumstance. It can be a woman who was raped, and if she have a child, God allows that child to be born. But one of the things, very quickly, we got 5 minutes. It's so much that you have said. And when you are a child of an alcoholic or a person that uses drugs, when you are a child, the family takes on certain roles, okay? A child, when they grow up in that dysfunction, there's roles they take on. Now, a child is not going to see all this going on in the family and say, let me assess the situation. Dad's drinking too much. No, the child is going to hide into a role. And we have some of the roles that we talk about in this book. And one of the roles is the hero. This is usually, I was the hero. This is usually the oldest child. This is the child that takes on all the responsibility, get all the rest of the siblings together. More is on this child. And as a result, the child's childhood is literally stolen from them because they don't operate it into this adulthood. And that's what happened to me. Then you have the mascot. This is the child that laughs a lot. When there's dysfunction, he'll laugh. And, you know, most comedians, they're mascots, if you ask me. And most comedians would tell you that they came out of families of alcoholics, okay? And they just use that for a career. So in the mascot life, if anything serious happens, then he's going to laugh it off. He's going to blow it off because this is a screen to protect himself. He's a child of an alcoholic. And then you have the scapegoat. This is the black sheep of the family. Okay, they blame him. So you got this elephant in the living room, which is the addiction, which is depression, which is molestation. Whatever the issue is, this elephant is in the living room. And everybody's in the family is ignoring the elephant. And so they don't deal with the elephant. They take on certain roles. And there's so much we can talk. Listen, Prophetess, thank you for joining this, sharing your testimony. It was a blessing. It blessed me. And I know that it blessed other people who are watching. Real talk, real issues, real solution. Listen, tell them how they can get in touch with you. If they need you to speak, come speak for them at their church, or you know, if they need to go to your website and or watch your broadcast that come on public access, tell them how they can get in touch with you. And then encourage someone. We have 2 minutes about what we just talked about. And our topic today is addiction in the family.
Well, thank you so much again, Prophet Swingler, for having me on your program. Truly, it's been a pleasure to be here. For those of you who are watching, you can reach me pretty much on social media by Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and you can also reach me on my website, daretooutdoyourself.com. Of course, you can tune in to Dare to Outdo Yourself, the television broadcast right here on Access 21, right here Mondays at 9 p.m. For those of you who are watching, we thank you for taking the time to tune in today. And I would just encourage anyone who's watching, as Prophet Swingler addressed, that you're not a mistake. I used to feel that way for so many years, thinking that, you know, if my parents had never had me, then my father would have more than likely had taken a different path, and he would not have turned out the way that he did. But unfortunately, he went on to be with the Lord. And the interesting thing is that he never was one to encourage education, and it was just, I found the Lord when I was in college. And if it had not been for that, I probably would not have led him to Christ before he passed away. Right before he passed away, he was afraid of how his life, where he was going and where he would be, and I led him to Christ. And so I just thank the Lord for being, entering into my life at the time that he did for me to get saved and to give my life over to Christ. But if it had not been so, I would not have helped my father to be led to Christ.
Amen. Again, Prophetess, thank you so much for being on the